Thank you, thank you. All right. As CEO, our next guest scaled Barstool Sports from a niche blog into a digital media giant valued at more than $500 million. For a candid conversation about leadership, the essential lessons, and the harsh truths about what it takes to really grow your business and career, please join me in welcoming from CBC's Dragon's Den, Michele Romanow, and CEO of Food52, Erika Ayers Badan. A big, warm welcome.
Great to be here.
Very much.
I heard you just arrived in Canada on the red eye.
I did.
Yeah.
From San Diego, which
Oh
is
my
a little
God.
bit different than Canada.
So you started with a marketing and branding background and then ended up as the CEO of Barstool Sports, whose brand identity was a bit of a pirate ship.
Yeah.
Led by a controversial founder, Dave Portnoy. What was the draw to go there and the story of how you got there?
Oh, it was long. I mean, are there Barstool Sports fans in the room? Nice. Okay. There's got to be Chiclets people here, I would think. I had gotten to be the CMO of AOL, and I was working in New York, and I hated it. And it was all I had ever wanted was to be a CMO, and I finally got the job, and I was like, this job sucks. I can't stand this job. It was really bad. But
I love the real honesty.
So I left to go launch a startup in music, which was about connecting music artists to fans. And what I saw in my time at AOL was that when you looked at social, which was fairly nascent at the time, all that matters was like the Kardashians and music artists. And I was working with Justin Bieber, and I was modeling. He was about to launch the Purpose album, and I was trying to figure out how he could create more business for himself based on how people felt about him and his music.
Right.
And I modeled it on this little blog from Boston called Barstool Sports. I was from Boston. I read it, when Dave Portnoy handed it out at the train station. I would read it in the morning. And I was a Patriots fan, and so I started, I was reading about Deflategate, which was happening in the NFL with Tom Brady, and at the bottom was this ad to buy free Brady t-shirts. And I bought 5. And I was like, this is a brilliant business model where you can make people feel something, and then you can create a commerce experience, and it actually feels like you're getting closer to the thing you care about. You're not feeling transacted.
Right.
And
because you're so close with the talent.
Because you're close and you believe and you want to badge yourself with the person. And I really believed that could happen in music. And long story short, we had gone to raise money, and the investors behind Barstool had said, hey, you've never heard of this company, but we just invested, $12 million in Barstool Sports. And I pulled out the app. I was like, it's the jankiest piece of technology you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But this is a brilliant company, and blah, blah, blah. And long story short, 3 months later, I wasn't even hired at Barstool. I was already working at Barstool, and then we had a pretty big run from there.
And then you were there for the whole run of selling it for $500 million, buying it back, the whole trajectory of the whole thing.
The summer of 2023 was a big sale summer.
Yeah, for sure. So Barstool Sports had a unique culture that challenged really a lot of the corporate norms. And how were you an effective CEO in that environment?
We had the tiger by the tail. When I got to Barstool in 2016, the brand had been around since 2004, and Dave likes to say we invented the internet. He invented the internet, which is so arrogant and also so great. But what he had was a fandom that you can't build anymore because there's so much fragmentation. Like within 10 years, there will be over 1 billion influencers on this planet 10 years from now. So if you just think about the fragmentation.
10 years, there will be over 1 billion influencers?
There's 50 million influencers now.
Holy smokes.
He had this really vibrant fan base, and it's very hard in the media business where you start every day with a blank page, and the only thing we had to propel us was really how much opinion we had, how loud we could be, how great the reaction was,
right.
And that's what made people pay attention.
Yeah.
And what I really did was to build a business architecture around that, which was to say, hey, let's make podcasts. Podcasting was just starting. Let's do live video. Live video was just starting. I found that they got into trouble if they were bored, so I really wanted them very busy.
Right.
And so I just kept them making content constantly, and then the money followed. And we probably grew from 5 million uniques in 2016 to, I think Barstool just passed 250 million uniques. So it's the growth in audience was really fairly crazy.
And so it was both the products, you know what I mean? A podcast did this,
Yep.
but it was also like controversy that you were creating, right? Was that part of it?
It wasn't.
And how do you do that? Most people would be like, we would love, like it's very, very difficult to grow a media empire.
I think most people don't like controversy, which is why it's hard to grow a media empire. If you don't care what people have to say about you, which is why I wrote a book called Nobody Cares About Your Career, which is if you don't care what people have to say about you, you can accomplish a whole lot. And the thing about Barstool was it wasn't that it was so much controversial, it's that it was highly, highly opinionated, and they really did not care who they offended. It was like equal opportunity offense.
Right.
And that was important. When we looked at talent, we went from probably 12 people in 2016 to, and I left, there was probably 400 people. When we would look at talent, there would be the people who you could tell were ready to be a talent at Barstool Sports and the people who weren't.
Right.
And the people who weren't were like, hey, I like my nights and weekends, and I'll respond when I feel like responding. The thing with Barstool is something happened and someone had an off-the-cuff opinion immediately, which is a lot of things to chase and a lot of things to say, and that's where you end up in controversy, because the internet is very polar. There's any kind of Twitter imaginable or X imaginable, so any reaction you have has an opposite reaction, and that's also what propelled
So it
our
was
growth.
both the startup life part of being a small company and having to be online all the time, and then the media part of that, which is any one of these stories could massively blow up, get picked up anywhere.
Exactly.
And then and then how did you personally get comfortable with being in that much controversy all the time? Was that always something you had and you just didn't care what people thought, or did you have to like grow that thick skin over a period of time?
It was hardening. Like, I'm much harder now than I was when I got to Barstool. I think, I was really surprised by it. And when I was starting to hire women, when I got to Barstool, I was the only woman. When I was starting to hire women, I would be like, hey, just make sure you don't have any nude pictures of yourself on the internet. Like, people are going to go looking for those.
It will be found.
So it was, it's, when you have a rabid fan base, they want to know everything about you. And one of the things that we did very well as a company was we made a reality show. Like, the cameras were always on.
Right.
I had no intention of being public. I'm not nearly as interesting as 99% of the people at Barstool. But because the camera was always on, you just got used to being more public. And then the more, by virtue of being public, when things happened, how you reacted to it mattered.
Right.
And you just have to go with it.
That's wild. So this might be changing now, but obviously sports media has been traditionally male-dominated. And so how did you navigate and influence the company's direction as a leader in that space?
Before I got to Barstool, there was one woman who had been at Barstool Sports, which was Jenna Marbles, who went on to be, pretty fantastic YouTuber and big success of her own right.
She started?
Yeah, she was at
Barstool?
Barstool. Yeah, she worked in a tanning salon in Boston, I think.
No way. I remember Jenna Marbles because she was like one of the first big YouTubers that was out.
Yep. They created a brand called Sheila La, I think. Anyways.
Yeah.
I still think sports media is very male dominated. When I worked in sports and when I worked at Barstool, I was usually the only woman in the room. I was actually around more women at Barstool than I was if we were at Sirius or we went to ESPN or we were talking to the big broadcast companies. I do think it's changing. Like, you look at what's happening around the WNBA and you look at the energy around women's sports, and I do think it's changing. But the reality is that, to really affect change, it's going to require men to give women a chance. That's how I got into sports, which is, Dave and Peter Chernin gave me a chance. But I think it's something that women in those positions have to be highly, highly visible, because there is still a lot of change that needs to be made.
Yeah. And is there specific things you did because the industry was so male-dominated then when you got there and you got that role?
I always wanted I always wanted to put my gender out there and then take it away. So, like for me, I sit on the board of a company called Axon, and the CEO was reminding me the other day that the first time I met him, I had a sweatshirt with a pair of boobs on it because I was doing a breast cancer awareness fund.
month.
And he was like, "You were wearing a sweatshirt with a pair of tits on it," and I was like, "I was," but then I wanted to have a conversation about your international rollout strategy. So I think putting your gender out there, being unapologetically who you are, is a big piece of it. I was never afraid that I was a woman, or I did recognize that I was different. It did piss me off when people would cut me off when I was trying to speak or being mansplained. But so long as you're willing to call that out, I think you're fine. You know this.
Yeah,
Well,
I try just not to either let those things bother me, or then they become a motivator for
yes,
me.
100%.
I was like, oh, you're underestimating me? That's cute.
100%.
Let me show you.
Yeah.
But it is true. I mean, I have one of my friend, Nadia Rawlingson, owns the WNB team in Chicago. She's a very prominent Black executive, and her line is like, I never lead with race. It's just, it's a
definitely.
part of who I am, but it's like never the thing. And it just allows me to go in with such strength.
Yeah,
So
I
always love
totally
that
agree
line.
with that. I hate the girl boss thing. Like, I just think it's gross. And I hate when people are like, the first female, CEO of Barstool Sports. I was like, no, I was the first CEO of Barstool Sports. I just happen to be a woman.
Yeah.
So I think, your gender, I think, gets in the way or matters as much as you feel it matters. And for me, I didn't really want to think about my gender at work. I didn't care to think about my gender at work.
Yeah, no, I try and use all of those moments to create motivation
definitely.
versus anything else.
Definitely.
So we've both scaled companies, and I'm curious about your philosophy kind of around that. So what are the key things you looked for before you started scaling? Because you talked about you guys were at 5 million uniques. And then how did you know there was real indication you had to scale? And what were those like inflection points as you kind of, went from zero to hero?
Yeah, when I got to Barstool, I had beat a bunch of guys out for the job. There was 74 like MBA button-down shirt vest people wanting the job, and then I got it. So I was kind of worried about getting fired. So I had made this 4-year plan that we would make $25 million in 4 years.
Yeah.
And we made $25 million in 16 months.
Wow.
So the growth was just really, really aggressive. I think the big things for me were the people who were great in the company when we were at 25 million were not necessarily the great people at 50, and they weren't the great people at 75 or 100 or 200 or 300. And so really being cognizant of who had tapped out and how we added scale and how we added capacity, because the problems that we encountered at $200 million were really different than when I was trying to make payroll at $15 million. So really being cognizant of who can travel the ride. And I was always, I think very insecure that I be able to make it the whole ride. So I was worried about that. And then I wanted people who were also able to teach me and able to push me along that way. And then, the other pieces were, we made so many mistakes. Like, we just failed all the time, and really understanding when we failed, why did we fail, and what could we do differently the next go around. And Barstool's kind of ruthless like that, where we were just really, really blunt about those failure moments, which were all inflection points. We thought we should go on television. We were on ESPN for one night. We got fired, and it was a huge moment for the company.
Was that the fastest anyone was fired from ESPN?
Probably. It wasn't the best. It was a little bit stressful, but it was a great moment for us, because what we did was we used it to position a David and Goliath story of there's this upstart in sports. Like, where did they come from? How did they get fired? Who are they?
I love that.
So what we did, I think, a very good job of in that scale is we brought our fans along with us.
Yeah.
And then we took the L's and made them into wins.
And did you find there was always that inflection point where you get to be the David and Goliath brand, you get to be the up and comer, and then one day you are the behemoth, and that storyline isn't resonating the same way?
Yeah, I think you have to worry about it. Like, I write about this in my book, which is that success is just a really terrible teacher. And when you're having a lot of success, it's very easy to be arrogant, and it's insane how fast you get sloppy. And so for us, the nice thing about living on the internet is, like, somebody's going to beat the crap out of you at any moment in time. So we were always getting knocked back down if we were starting to feel a little bit too big for our britches. But, you know, I do think now the things that Barstool can do and can't do are very different, and how the story looks is very different than it was in 2018 or 2019 or 2020. So,
but I love that line, like, success is a very bad teacher.
It's a terrible teacher.
It's so true, and there is so much truth around when you scale, the people that got you to the first bit don't get you to the second bit. And it's sad because no matter what, I mean, everyone's like, you know, a company is a sports organization, you got to play a role. Oh, that's true. But when you're small, it still always feels like a family.
Yeah,
so it's
definitely.
really,
it's very
really
intimate.
hard to kind of detach yourself from just some of the personal relationships that happen there.
Yeah, definitely.
So then how did you know it was time to move on? 10 years in, what was the
I have
inflection
been there a
point?
decade. I'm in my 40s, and I'm like, gosh, I've spent like 15 years marketing to like 18-year-old men. It's like time to hang up the cleats. So that was a little bit.
You can give us the playbook on 18-year-old
Yeah, it was like,
men.
I'm
Maybe I only
good-
want to know
I'm
the first
good
3
with the-
bullets.
Yeah, like I'm good with that group. But I also, you know, we sold the company twice in 2023. So we sold it to Penn Entertainment for $550 million in February, which was a Herculean effort. And then in August, we bought it back for Dave for $1. And I was like, hey, I came here, I thought we would do 25 million bucks in 4 years. And, you know, I was just trying not to get fired. I really felt like I had given everything I possibly could to this company. I love that company. But I didn't want to stay too long. And I also felt there was, after that year of selling it twice, you know, most companies are lucky to exit once.
Yeah.
That I wasn't going to top that, and there wasn't something next that was going to scare me as part of it, and I was like, I need to move on.
Okay, so it was kind of after the second
Yeah, it was
transaction.
like, gosh, buying this company back for $1, you know, 8 months after we sold it for $500 million.
How did that all happen?
It's like a way too long
Okay.
story. It's like a very long story, but
It's on the internet.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. We had a crazy summer.
So then you go from Barstool to Food52, which is a food and lifestyle brand. So was that the natural next step? Was that something you were brainstorming? Tell us a little bit about Food52.
Food52 is a lifestyle home recipe food company started by 2 female founders. I had wanted to go to a female-founded company. That was important to me. I also wanted to go into a business where I knew 50-60% of how to do it, but you know, 40-50% I
rest.
didn't. So I
And you
really
were
wanted
marketing
to.
to 18-year-old men.
And I wanted to actually market products that I was interested. I mean, like, I wasn't going to go chug 40 high noons on a weekend, but I would like a great recipe or something on my table. So I was like, I'd love to be around a product that talks to people like me.
That's very cool. And so maybe we'll go with something more general, which is that I think in a lot of your book, you talk about some of these harsh truths about leadership, right? We talked about a couple of them. The same people that get you to certain phases don't get you the whole way there. What are some other really harsh truths about leadership that you had to learn over time?
Yeah.
And the harsher, the better on this question.
Yeah, you know, leadership is tough. It's a pain in the ass. You are dealing with everyone else's complaints most of the day, and how you respond and not react to those complaints and how you think about creating a vision, how you elevate a strategy, how you communicate is critically important. You know, I think in terms of the hard truths, the more you fail, the earlier in your career, the better off you are, period. And my observation of people, and especially women, is they don't like to fail. And they don't want to be made to feel stupid or uncomfortable or inadequate. And I understand that. Like, I really do understand that. But the more you can fail, the faster, harder you put yourself out there, and the more you scrape your knee early on. By the time you get into your 30s and your 40s, you're equipped and you can fall down and you can get back up again. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that a lot of people in the workplace right now just can't fall down. And the ability to fall down is really, really important. I think the second piece is, I think there's a lot of victimization at work now, where you blame your boss, you blame COVID, you blame, you know, whatever. There's somebody else to blame for all of your problems
your
at
dog's
work.
sick.
Exactly. And it's like, you know what? Nobody's it falls to you. Like, you are in charge of your career. Nobody's coming to help you, and no one is responsible for your success but you. And the sooner people realize that and take accountability and own it, I think the more fun it gets. And then the last thing is that, I really think there's so much competition to go for the bright, shiny object that everybody thinks is cool, and, go for the job nobody wants. Like, take the project no one will take on. Like, that's how I built my career, which is, I don't know if I got the Barstool Sports job because 74 other people didn't want it, or I just really wanted it, but go for something that not everybody else wants. And I think that is a great place to have a playground where you can learn in the margin, and learning in the margin is just critically important.
I love that advice, that don't go after things that people want. I also give youngsters always the piece of advice that, like, everyone thinks that, like, we're monitoring them day to day. You know what I mean? It's like we're tracking all 25 things you're doing. When you actually see headcount as a CEO, you're like, Erika, she did the following 2 things in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So make sure your 2 things are, like, really effing good.
Totally.
Like, deliver on
Yeah.
2 big projects, have them create big impact for the company, because no one cares if you responded to an email in 5 minutes or 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, that's not gonna measure anything. And people get really lost in, like, well, I was really good at the details. It's like, no, but you have to
nobody cares.
deliver something. Nobody cares.
Yeah,
Nobody cares.
Yeah, I have a chapter in the book that says, does your boss's boss's boss know what you do?
Yeah.
And it's a really good question. Like, does your boss's boss's boss know what you do? And the fact of the matter is, you work in a big tech company, your boss's boss's boss probably doesn't even understand what you do, let alone who you are and what you're doing. So
Yeah.
really thinking about how you articulate and advocate for yourself, but also you just get work done.
Okay, last question. What's the biggest mistake you made early in your career, and how did that change your views going forward?
I was scared early in my career. I thought that I needed to work in big companies. I thought I needed to. I wish I had taken far more risk. I don't regret anything in my career. I think I've had a really weird, meandering,
Amazing.
awesome career. Yeah, I loved it. Like,
Yeah.
I really love to work. I'm very, very curious. I love people. I really love to work. But I wish that I had believed in myself more early on. I wish I had traveled further from home. I wish I had gone to California, or, moved to the West Coast, or which I ended up doing later on in my career, but I wish I had done it earlier.
Amazing. Well, you guys heard it here first. I mean, there's a great Eastern European line that's like, those don't take risk are those that don't drink champagne. So it's very important to take that risk early in your career. I think that was a huge part of my career, is that I was willing to move to any place.
Yep.
We opened a caviar fishery in New Brunswick. We moved to a place that we didn't even know. I moved to countries where I didn't speak the language, and all of that gives you a tremendous ability to scale and grow. But Erika, this was an incredibly refreshing and
Thank
honest
you.
conversation. Thank you for being here
Thank
with us
you.
in Toronto. Let's give her a really warm round of applause.
Thank you. Great. That was great.